Hello, everyone, and welcome to the newest installment of Cinema Strategies, Kent State and Independent Films, a little series where we bring great experienced filmmakers to you during the time of COVID and when we can't get speakers to come to our university. We bring them to you through this avenue. And we have someone very interesting today. Last time we had an actor slash director. And we have all kinds of different people, but today we have someone who's very diverse. He's a screenwriter. He wrote a small film called The Right Girl. He's worked on Silver Linings Playbook, August Osage County, The Hateful Eight, and most notably, all Marvel films past Civil War. And he also has the most professional website of any filmmaker that I've come across so far doing this web series. So here is Jeff Willis. Thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Willis.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. So how are you doing, Jeff? What was the last film you've seen? This is a softball I start out with a lot of our guests. So what was the last film you've seen?
Let's see. The last actual movie I saw was we watched Luca as a family together, the new Pixar movie, which was a lot of fun. With two small kids now, a lot of the films I do see are family oriented. So that was the most recent one I've seen. Outside of stuff I've had to watch for work. So it was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, I really like Luca. I can't remember the last Pixar film I didn't really like, and that was The Good Dinosaur. But every other Pixar film I love. So yeah, I'm so happy that I'm kind of disappointed it wasn't in theaters again, but hopefully that'll start up soon.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how Disney and the other streamers have kind of like figured out their release strategies in this COVID world without theaters. But I agree. I mean, it's really rare that there's a Pixar movie I don't enjoy, and hopefully they start making them to theaters again soon.
Definitely, I totally agree. And as a filmmaker yourself, I was wondering, what is one filmmaker that, as a young student who went to film school and always wanted to be a filmmaker, who is one filmmaker that you always kind of looked up to, and what was their first film that really touched you as a filmmaker?
I mean, I think it's hard because there's so many, right? And like obviously, like Spielberg was a huge influence because I grew up during the years where he had E.T. and the stuff that really all the stuff that really kind of yeah, there was just such a great run and just hit at just that point in my childhood where like they really spoke to me. But I've always been, and I've never been much of a tour film person. So like, even though I can really appreciate the films of, Scorsese and Coppola and stuff, like I find that I really gravitate towards those filmmakers that have a real sense of kind of the, like, just kind of the mass appeal of entertainment. So like I really I think Zemeckis is great. I think that there have been hit or misses, but Michael Bay is really good because like he always seems to know exactly what kind of movies he makes, and for better or worse, like what you're going into when you see a movie. And I've always enjoyed those filmmakers where regardless of the material, everything they make is distinctly their own, but they're not necessarily the one sole authorial voice as much as like they just know how to pull together all of the different departments in a film production to make what they see on the screen.
Yeah, they're great collaborators. Like, yeah, Zemeckis, he's great with all his. I've heard that people say he's the best, like, CG kind of. He embraces it, but he does it in such a way that's really natural for his films, and it really works. Yeah, they're smart with the way that they work with the great people that they hire, which makes them great directors.
Yeah, I'm always interested in those directors that are able to push the envelope. And the same thing, Ang Lee is someone who I don't love all of his films, and very few of them are probably in my top 10. But like he's always doing something interesting. He's always trying something new, some new technology, some new approach. And I really admire like filmmakers who aren't afraid to try new things and see what works. In a way, it's kind of a refreshing change from the old school guys who, still want to shoot on 35 or have this, this is the way to make movies. It's the way it's always been. And I really enjoy, people who are kind of at the forefront pushing the envelope saying, hey, film has such amazing technological advancements year after year. I really enjoy the filmmakers that are like, let's work with that and see what we can do with it.
exactly. And going a little off course now, but you kind of worked on a Ang Lee film recently, which was Gemini Man, correct?
Yeah, it was it was interesting. Again, it's one of those things. I'm not sure that film in particular is one that all goes in my top list. But
Yeah.
he there's so many articles about how he used a unique filming method, and he used a specialized type of camera to get certain shots. And again, I'm always interested in that. It was the same thing with when Chris Nolan for like The Dark Knight used the specific aspect IMAX ratio for the bank heist scene. And I really enjoy filmmakers that try that, and the Gemini Man thing was a little challenging because, the specific format he used was only something that I think like 15 or 20 theaters in the country were like equipped to actually show, and everything else was a cut down, which was a little bit of a bummer because like I would have loved to have seen it, in one of those theaters where like you could really test drive that technology. But again, it's one of the things I appreciate about Ang Lee's films in particular is like he's never shy about trying those things and seeing how it works.
Yeah, definitely. And I was also wondering, just as someone who's researching you as a fan of filmmaking and how the business side works, because this is going a little ahead of what I planned, but I thought you were kind of tied to Marvel in a way, but you had the opportunity to work on Gemini Man. So how does that work from a business side contractually? How were you able to work on Gemini Man?
It's actually a little bit of a crazy story, but
Okay.
ultimately, I left Marvel for a period of time to try a new opportunity, and it didn't work out. And long story short, I ended up going back to Marvel. But the way it worked out, from a practical standpoint, is the point at which I left Marvel to take another opportunity. I had a certain amount of work that I had agreed to kind of finish, and then I consulted for a little bit for them. So it rather ironically, like I ended up not missing a Marvel movie in terms of the chance to work on it because my tenure away from the company just happened to coincide during that slow period after Endgame and before the pandemic. So so I did technically leave Marvel and then get rehired, and that's the point at which I was working on Gemini Man and Terminator, and some of the other stuff for Skydance, for Global Road, the companies I left for,
Wow.
and Blumhouse, and then but then I ended up coming back to Marvel and picking up literally right where I left off. So
Yeah, from an outsider, it just looks like Marvel said, you have some free time. You can, like, you were still working for them in my mind, but it's interesting to see the other side of it because
it's definitely a crazy period in my professional history, and I think at one point I was literally working on credits for 3 different studios at the same time, like, which it was a lot of work. But yeah, I was previously and once again fully employed at Marvel. Marvel is my only full-time job. And then I consult from time to time now on other projects with other companies I've worked with, just if they need advice on credits and stuff. But that's more of a professional courtesy at this point and not an actual job.
Awesome. Okay. Just to clear my mind, because I always want to learn more about the business aspect because that's very important to anyone who wants to be in any industry. So thank you for clarifying, Jeff. So my next question is, you grew up near the Sacramento area. So did you always see filmmaking as like where you're going to be now in your career, or was there something else that you saw when you were younger?
I think the filmmaking was the first like coherent vision I had for my career. Up until then, I figured I was going to go into business, like a practical career, and I would take get a business degree and do something businessy. And it was a point when I was in high school, my senior year, and I was in a class with a friend of mine who was one of those, I've wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 9. My parents bought me my first camcorder, kind of a thing. And it was one of those situations where those assignments where they give you your choice. They're like, oh, you can take a test or do an essay or do a project or whatever. And he was always can I make a film? And I started helping him with those and had so much fun. I was like, I didn't realize like all of this behind the scenes production work that went into making a movie, but immediately fell in love with it. and realized that that's kind of where I wanted my career to go. Is I'm like, if I could work on these, this would be such a cool, job to have. And so from that point, I planned on going to film school, and then ultimately I kind of planned on being a screenwriter. In the naivete of my youth, assuming I would just automatically get a screenwriting job right out of college, I'd be fine. But what I ended up doing was getting a job as an assistant in the industry at a production company to pay the bills in the meantime while I was waiting for my screenwriting career to take off. And long story short, 20 years later, I'm still waiting for my screenwriting career to take off. And in the meantime, I've built a decent career for myself, working on the business side, working for a lot of different companies.
So you're still kind of nurturing that screenwriting ambition, correct?
Yeah, I'm at a point now where, there was definitely a period of time where I thought that I was going to, again, transition out of the day job and be a full-time screenwriter. And I kind of discovered just through the practicalities of the business and everything, I really still enjoy writing, and it's still something I pursue on my own. But the life of a screenwriter is one that's really tough. I mean, you don't have a consistent paycheck. You don't have, any sense of work from one year to the next, again, unless you're at the top level where you're just constantly sought after. And it kind of became a point where I reached a point in my career where I became okay with the idea of being an executive who occasionally writes things, rather than, a guy who had a day job and really, really, really wanted to be a full-time writer one day. So, if something came along in the future and was, hey, do you want to, show run a show, or we, the point at which my writing is taking so much time that I have to, no longer work full time. I mean, that would of course be the dream still, but I'm also now okay being a guy who really enjoys his day job working, on the business side of things, and then, writes things from time to time when I have a chance, and sells things, gets things made as available.
Yeah, both are still both viable options. I've heard stories of like executives in your position who do still sell and produce like pretty notable things. So I think there's still great possibility, and I hope there is.
It's also fun because, like, as a fan myself, I mean, obviously the Marvel movies are a dream for me, because like I love the MCU and everything, and obviously the dream would be to write for a company like Marvel someday. But I mean, that's talk about even making it as a professional screenwriter, let alone making it as a professional screenwriter who writes big budget studio movies. So in a way, it's really kind of liberating, because my day job is working on my dream movies. So everything else that comes along, like, I don't feel that push, or that like I'm missing out on something if I'm doing smaller movies or getting hired for rewrites in a smaller capacity, because I still in some aspect of my life get a chance to work on those big budget movies that I really enjoy and really take a lot of pride in as well.
Yeah, so you could still do both in a way, like you said, like still work on those big budgets in a role on those, and then still write and like smaller stuff possibly. So hopefully that's reality we live in a few years. Snap our fingers and that could happen. But after graduating from SCU Long Beach, my bad, what was your plan or ambition? Like you said, you wanted to be a screenwriter. That was at the time, that's what you saw. But what exactly did you see? Was it your plan to like get on a film set as soon as possible and like maybe intern, be a PA? Like what did you see after you graduated?
In film school, I had a great screenwriting teacher who, two things happened when I was in film school. One, I took a phenomenal production management class that really got me interested in producing. I'm like, the idea of like the nuts and bolts, like physical production, like making things happen, making sure the craft services is there on time, making sure we have the location agreement in place. But, like all of that, that class really inspired me to get interested in that area. So I knew coming out of film school that both writing and producing were interesting to me. And then I had a really great screenwriting professor that said, he was kind of sitting me down as I was trying to figure out what to do after college. And he goes, there's going to be a point at which no one can make you a better writer except for yourself. Like, you're going to reach a point where you've learned all you can learn, where you've got as much, advice as you can get. And the only thing that's going to make you better or more successful as a writer is just sitting down and writing stuff, like on your own, like just generating output. But he said, but on the other hand, if you want to produce, there is always something new to learn about producing. No one knows everything, and there is always a new skill to learn. So he said, he actually was the one that kind of laid out my career path, which is, if you want to do both, find a job in the industry where you are learning the nuts and bolts of producing while you are also developing your writing. And that really kind of informed my goal. So I got a job. My goal was to aim to get a full-time job at the company I interned at, because I knew people there. It was my one connection with the industry. So I called them. I think the development exec I reported to, I think I called that poor guy like every week for almost a year, being like, hey, any openings? Hey, any openings? And they finally go, yeah, an assistant opening just landed, and I went in for an interview. But that was ultimately my goal out of college, was to learn the day-to-day industry, how do movies get made, while I worked on my writing on the side. And you can argue that I probably stayed in that mentality a little too long, because I'm still there. But it's been a really great process to learn both the business side during my day job while continuing to write on my own.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but did your film that you wrote, did that release in 2011 or 2013?
The Right Girl, which was a TV movie, actually came out in 2015. We originally sold it, I think it was 2012, and then did rewrites for about a year. They shot it very quickly and turned it around. We sold it to a independent producer that makes these kinds of made-for-TV movies for Lifetime, Hallmark, and he has a very he's kind of the Blumhouse model, where it's like, I know exactly what I want. I shoot my films the same way, and our film fit those criteria. So again, it was from interest to actual release was, I think, about 2 years, which is fast by most standards. But it was because we sold a very specific product to someone who was looking to make a very specific movie, and we avoided a lot of the the development hell of it all, where like things are developed and you rewrite and you start over. I don't think we did a single rewrite for that project that wasn't production related, to address a production concern rather than a creative concern.
Wow. Like, your career and who you are as a person is very interesting to me, because you seem like a very energetic, creative person. And from an outside perspective, your job seems kind of repetitive in a way. Do you find your position fulfilling, to you as a creative person? Because I see you as a writer and like a very creative person. So what do you think? Do you think it's fulfilling on a daily basis?
It is. And I think that has come through a lot of years of clarification, because I would have told you, if you had asked me that question 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I probably would have given you different answers each time. And the truth is, I spent a small stints of my life, of my career, working in creative, and I found that when I worked in creative, I spent so much time thinking about story and character all day long for my job that I didn't have the energy to do it when I got home. Because I'm like, oh, gee, the last thing I want to do is sit down and think about story and character after reading scripts for 8 hours, So I realized, I'd say probably about 10 years ago, that like creative wasn't the right professional outlet for me, because I still wanted to have that spark of inspiration when I got home to work on my own stuff.
Okay.
But then there was definitely a point where I wasn't quite sure what that business aspect was, and what really ended up, it was Marvel that ended up being the job that kind of codified that for me, because prior to Marvel, I had a kind of a general business administrative type role at a lot of companies, tracking payments and deadlines and that kind of stuff. And I found that stuff I didn't realize it until I had moved on to Marvel. But that stuff is the stuff I find kind of tedious. Is the just day in, day out kind of business stuff that doesn't really impact the product. What I really, really like about credits is, even though it is tedious and even though it is detail oriented and not particularly creative in and of itself, it is an opportunity to directly contribute to the final product. I mean, I work really long hours to fit all of the Marvel work in a day, and it's nice to, at the end of the process, go and sit in the theater and look at a portion of the film, even if it is the names at the end, and say, I made that and contributed that to the process. It wasn't just me working in a back office or kind of facilitating things behind the lines. Like, I delivered that 6 minutes of the movie, or in the case of Marvel, 7.5 minutes sometimes. And that is where I've found contentment in the process, where, again, like, it is a little tedious and not particularly creatively fulfilling, but that's what I have the writing for on the side. And instead, what I have for a day job is a job where I get to contribute to a final product that I believe in. And that's what kind of gets me through the day, for those times when, admittedly, my job doesn't feel terribly creative, or, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again.
So in a way, you have the best of both worlds, because you get to contribute in an actual manner that you see on the screen, and then you have a sanctuary back at home where you can facilitate your creativity. So that's a good way to think of it. Thank you for enlightening me with your perspective on that. That's very cool. And with your job at Marvel, do you oversee, like, I know it's all marketing, but like every poster, like every alternate poster, do you see all of those, like, make sure they're all in order, all credits are in place? Like even this Spider-Man one back here, do you remember that one ever?
Yeah, so it's my job at Marvel is really two parts. One is delivering accurate credits to the film, making sure the names are spelled right contractually, all the guilds have signed off, all of the kind of the minutia that results in a set of credits that hopefully don't get either any lawsuits or claims, and B, like, no one calls us and says, hey, my name's spelled wrong. Like, that's one area. And then the second part of that is ensuring the accuracy of credits and other legal requirements for all of our stuff. So all of our marketing material, merchandising, co-promotions, all of that stuff I have to review to make sure not just the credits are correct, but that there aren't any legal issues. So for example, looking at a poster and saying, oh, this one actor has a likeness tie to this one, so if you show this person, you have to show this person. Oh, here are the names that have to be above the artwork title. It's a lot of that kind of evaluation. So yes, I do see just about every TV spot, movie poster, television commercial, popcorn bucket, like anything you can imagine that is involved in the release of a film and the marketing of it, which for a Disney, Marvel Studios property is an extensive amount of product. I'm reviewing for basically any legal concerns.
Like, you see so many posters, so many like products. Are there any that really catch your eye and say, like, I want this piece once I can get my hands on it, like, to have in my house? Yeah,
it's and I'll do credit to our Disney marketing team, who is phenomenal about that stuff. I mean, they will release stuff all the time, and people at the company get jealous. So, like, make sure I get one of those posters. It's interesting too, because working at Marvel has been my first experience working at a company that has had consistent releases throughout the year. Like, it's not like a lot of companies, work really hard to get a production or distribution commitment, and then they make the movie, and then they kind of look for their next opportunity. And Marvel's the first company I've worked for that's had that studio model of, like, look, every May and November we put out a movie, so we're constantly seeing new. It's a new experience for me to be like, every 6 months we're going to see a new poster for something coming out, because the next movie's coming. And yeah, there is definitely there's a palpable excitement in the office when something really hits. When it's a particularly good trailer or poster, just like, you can just tell because everyone's talking about it. And one of the earlier ones that comes to mind for me is that very first Thor Ragnarok teaser, where you don't even know the Hulk's in it until at the very end he bursts through the door, and Hulk and Thor goes, yes, like that moment. I remember like it just blew people's minds. Seeing it early on, it was such a fun spoiler, because at that time no one knew Hulk was going to be in the movie. And seeing those moments are really fun to see how it plays out for a crowd. And again, in the case of merch or product like posters and stuff like that, of course, all of us are like, yeah, that's a great poster, I want to get one of those for my office, kind of a thing.
Yeah, like you said, it's a revolving door. Like the product at Marvel Studios like never really ends. It keeps going all year round. So like even as your role, like since Civil War till now, it's kept like speeding up slowly but steadily, like with more content, and especially now with all the Disney Plus content that's been releasing. Like, has your role been expanded in a way, or do you have more people working around you to make it more, like you say you work a lot, which I completely believe, but do you have more people working with you and helping you out on a daily basis now?
So at the moment, no, which is something that is being rectified. Like I just got approval to post for a new person to help. But yeah, it's funny because so when I got started, coming in at Civil War, I had the opportunity to talk to the person I was replacing that was leaving, and we were kind of talking about the job. And he says, and this was back when Marvel was releasing 2 movies a year, and he would say, look, when you're in production, things are crazy, long hours, you got, everything's under a deadline. He says, but that's offset by in between the films, there's some downtime and it's a little slower. So what you end up doing is he's like, you'll work 3 months, really, really long hours, but then you'll get 3 months where it's kind of easy and you can kind of set your own schedule and have a little more free time. And then it ramps up again. And I thought to myself when I took the job, I'm like, okay, like I can do that. Like I can work really hard for a few months at a time and then get a break to kind of recharge. And I think it was my first week that at Marvel, they then announced they were doing 3 movies a year instead of 2. So I'm like, okay, there goes, it's going to be a little more crunch. It's going to be a little more, but it'll be okay. And 3 movies a year pretty much filled up all of my time. There was no downtime anymore. It was just moved from one movie to the next. I left Marvel and then came back, and I came back right as streaming was. Part of the reason I came back is because of their streaming thing. So I came back and I said, okay, great. Like, we do 3 movies a year. And they go, great, but now you're also in charge of streaming. so now you're doing the 3 features a year plus, 3 shows a year, and that really, that was the point at which we started talking about not, whether one person could really handle all of that work. And I was strictly, advocating like, no, I can't, I need help. But that was also around the time that the pandemic hit and everything kind of got thrown. The movies got pushed, staffing got cut, like it just ended up being such a wrench that got thrown into it that we are kind of just now starting to get out of that. Our backlog of movies is starting to, line up. Black Widow's now coming out, Shang-Chi's finishing up. So we're kind of back on the path that we were originally on. And it's just a year later that we're having all these conversations about how much help do we need? How many people do we need to tackle this kind of project for this amount of output? Because I think ultimately the goal is, I think it's 4 movies and 4 shows a year is enormous content. And yeah, for that amount of content, it'll need to be more than just me.
Yeah, probably one person for streaming, one person for like theatrical releases. Like in my mind, from an outsider's perspective, that's what I would envision. But I'm sure you would know better. But you've been doing streaming for a little bit now. Is that a little less like marketing and like? Is there a little less work with streaming, or is it just as much as the features?
TV is definitely more work than features because
wow, okay.
It's hard sometimes to kind of quantify it, but you have to remember that for each movie, you have a final product you have to deliver. Well, in TV, you have a final product you have to deliver in the form of an episode, and you have to do that 6, 8, 10, 12 times in a season to get everything done. So in a lot of ways, streaming is a little less work intensive because, for example, like when I do the credits, we use a template for all episodes. So we're only really changing things that change from episode to episode. We're not, typing the credits from scratch on every episode, but it does come with the added complication of, doing a set of credits every week for 10 weeks straight, which compounds the problem. So it's TV is not, I would say, is not more difficult or complicated than films. I think films is the more nuanced job, but TV is such a volume business that it ends up taking up, so much time gets done because you have so much content that you're churning to try to get stuff done.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but yeah, there's 6 episodes of Loki. It's like 6 mini films in a way, but you have that format. But yeah, there may be a bit less marketing, right? For this, like, I guess the marketing is more spread out, right? It might just be as much, but it's just spread out, I guess.
Yeah, the marketing is a little different for TV. I mean, they have different approaches, and they have different kind of standards for TV versus film. And obviously, when you're talking about a $200+ million franchise movie, like, nothing can compete with the marketing campaign for that. They put so much money and so much time and effort into that. And TV is a little different because again, it's not that kind of event type thing where but they are trying to keep things active. So what I end up seeing is, I think I see probably more content for streaming because, you've got now you've seen episode 2, here's the commercial for episode 3. Now we're halfway through, wait till here's the promo for the last half of the season. And I end up seeing more content for TV, but again, it's a little less high stakes than it is for a feature where it's like, this is the billboard that's going at, the corner of Hollywood and Highland. Let's make sure it's right, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And one thing that I was especially thinking, like, when I watch credits, like, is there a difference between and or with, like, at the last credit name, like at the, like, opening credits wise, like, you have all the names and the last name, is it and or with, is that any different? Like,
yeah, so it's all about kind of negotiating prominence with actors, but yes, essentially, at its most basic, obviously, the more important the role, the more important the actor, the higher the billing to get, the closer they get to top billing. So, you're talking first position, second position, like that kind of thing. Where the with and the ands have come in is those times where you have a high profile actor who isn't necessarily a lead of the film, but you wouldn't feel comfortable saying, like, can we really put Samuel L. Jackson as like 4th billing in a movie? Like, he's a huge star. So what we end up doing is you start offering positions toward the end of the credits where you say, okay, look, like, here's all the actors lined up that are in the movie, but then here's, very extra special, with this special actor and this special actor as Nick Fury or whatever. And it's all ways of distinguishing, essentially, really high profile talent that maybe isn't the lead in the movie, but is obviously such a significant name that you want to call them out in particular. So yeah, it's kind of the hierarchy of credits is you want to be as close to the first build as possible, or you want to be the with and the end at the end that's kind of set aside and has special language, just saying, like, these are our special contributors.
Yeah, a little private island for them. But do you have a preference to use, like, with first or and first, or if you had to?
It's basically industry custom. So, like, and is the most prominent credit. With is the second most prominent credit. A second with is, so you kind of go backwards. And all due credit to our attorneys who are the ones that have to negotiate that, where as they're making a deal with someone, we'll be making a deal for, let's say, Thor Ragnarok is a good example, where you're making deals with people and all of a sudden you say, okay, well, we're going to bring, Tessa Thompson in. What can we guarantee her? Well, Thor is number 1, or, Hemsworth is number 1 and Tom Hiddleston's number 2. So maybe we could do 3. Oh, but we are guaranteed third position this other person. So maybe we can do an and. Oh, and then all of a sudden Jeff Goldblum's coming in. So, like, if we get Jeff Goldblum, we, like, all due credit to the amazing attorneys we have that are, that work with me to track what credits we've already given so that we don't double up, because that's the real danger, is guaranteeing 2 people an and credit, the only and credit, or 2 people the third position, and then you're really stuck. So, it's all basically heavily negotiated. As you're making deals with talent, you determine what the credit's going to be based on what's available, their prominence, how big the role is, and then as I'm putting together the credits at the end, I go through all of the contracts and say, okay, who gets what credit? This guy's first, this guy's second, this guy's and this guy's with. And then we have a bunch of people who are they say no position guarantee. Like they might just be guaranteed a single card, but no position. And that's when you go to the producers and say, great, here are 5 more people that need cards. You tell me the order you want to put them in, based on prominence in the film or whatever.
Awesome. That's a little bit of insight for everyone. For co-produced films, like with the Spider-Man films, how does your role work? Because I'm sure Sony has their own credits executive, I'm assuming. So do you work with them in a sense, that person?
Yeah. So for a lot of the films that were licensed out, we don't have anything to do with that. So like, for example, the X-Men film at Fox, the Spider-Man franchise films like Venom and stuff like that aren't anything that we have any overlap with. So most of and you're right, they have their own credits folks. So my role in that respect is mostly just to double check the credits and see if any Marvel comic creators need to be credited, or if there's any major oversights. But it's mostly those companies and their credits people that are doing it. Where there's been a unique situation with the overlap has been the 3 Spider-Man films, the Homecoming, Far From Home, and the new one coming out. And that's been particularly unique because Marvel has been co-producing them with Sony. And that has been a case where I've had to work much more closely hand in hand with Sony's credits people to make sure that we're all on the same page, because it's obviously those films are technically Sony's in terms of who owns them, and they are technically the lead studio, but as essentially for hire producers and who have brought most of their own crew and our own people on, it's been beneficial to have me involved, just because it's a lot of the talent we normally work with. So it's helped shortcut some of the confusion and the frustration that comes with credits, toward the end of the process.
So is it a faster process to work on those Spider-Man films, the Sony co-produced ones?
It's faster for me only in the sense that someone else is ultimately responsible for the credits. So so I find myself more of in an advisory capacity, where it's like, okay, like let me get answers to the specific questions you have, but your job is the job to lay out the credits and make sure they're delivered and stuff like that. So I find those films both really fun and very frustrating to work on, because I don't have the final authority to make things the way I want them to, but also they're not my responsibility. So they're the only films I get to sit in the theater for the MCU and not worry that something's wrong, because which happens with every single other film. I sit there and I think, oh God, someone next to me, at the premiere is going to be like, they spelled my name wrong, or, oh, they missed me entirely, or whatever. And the Spider-Man ones are the only ones where I can sit in the theater and if he say, this is great. If there's any problems, it wasn't my fault.
Oh, you hinted a little bit before, but there could be major problems when it comes to your job, like you forgetting someone's name or you misspelling someone's name. Has that happened before with your job, with your time at Marvel Studios? And have incorrect products or in marketing ever been released with like you said, 2 names have to be on the same poster sometimes? Or have those issues ever come to rise when it's too late, maybe? Or how do you remedy those situations if they ever come up?
So we've definitely had issues, names misspelled here and there, someone left off the credits, that kind of a thing. It's kind of part and parcel of the process. Is there's always something that gets overlooked or isn't ideal, or or happens for whatever reason. In most cases, most talent have it's called a cure, which is in legal jargon, we have the opportunity to fix a mistake. Like you can't automatically sue us if there's a mistake if we're able to fix it going forward. So what happens a lot is in the case of a significant problem, like every time a problem comes in, we have to sit down and figure out, all of the logistics of fixing it. So, someone has complained there's a problem. Is this something that needs to be addressed? Like, do we have to do it? If we do, how much is it going to cost? And it involves a lot of conversations about basically kind of a cost benefit. Is this a change we need to make? Or is it one we can, just say, sorry, it's wrong. Like, what can you do? And there have definitely been times where there have been errors where we have to say, gee, we really have to spend the money to fix this. And there have definitely been times where we say, gee, I'm really sorry that your name is spelled wrong, but there's really nothing we can do about it. And what we end up doing in most cases again, unless it's a major contractual issue, is we just fix it going forward. So we'll say, your name is wrong in the credits, so sorry about that. We will fix it going forward, which usually means for features like for home video, like the home video version will have your correct credits on it. Or in the case of our streaming shows, after the initial airing of a show, we'll fix it later for kind of the permanent episode that lives on the service. So it's kind of one of those things where if someone on Falcon and the Winter Soldier says my name is spelled wrong, I caught it when I watched episode 102 today. Obviously, I can't fix it for initial airing because you just saw the mistake. But, a couple weeks from now, we'll fix it so that anyone who watches the credits after, July 21st will see your correct credit in there.
One of the kind of most notable, I think, not issues, but things that come under your kind of domain in the MCU, it was on an Endgame poster, and a lot of people were talking about it when the poster came out, and they were saying Denai Guerrero's name was missing. Was that an oversight, or was that just something with the legal jargon that she was missing or whatever? How did that come about? Because that was big when in the trades, it was kind of big, and people were talking about it at the time.
It's always a little. I always get a little frustrated with articles like that because there's a lack of understanding about what goes into the process, and in that particular situation, and again, I'd have to look at the contracts to be sure, but I believe that the decision was made to add Denai in later based on the amount that she appeared in the film. So it wasn't that she was supposed to be included and wasn't. It was that she was never guaranteed to be included, but then we decided to add her because and this happens a lot in our projects, as we go through the edit and as we move things, some roles gain prominence, some lose prominence. We cut some scenes, we add others in additional photography. So, and again, I don't recall exactly, but I believe that was a situation where as we were finalizing the film, it was like, oh, Denai plays a larger role in this than we thought, so we should put her in the credits as well on the poster. But again, without having that context, a lot of media outlets ran with that. They forgot her. Can you believe they forgot, Denai? And it's always a little frustrating because a lot of, sometimes those kinds of issues are oversights, sometimes are mistakes. There's been a number of times where we've released credits on a piece of marketing that then have to be corrected later because just in the course of the process, someone got missed, someone got added, someone shouldn't have been there in the first place. So there are legitimate errors, but then there are also just creative considerations that are made, down the line in the process. And it's tough because, like so many things, if you don't have insight and visibility into the process, all you see is a name that wasn't there all of a sudden popped up, and and then it's Marvel, so there's always speculation on why we do what we do, what it was. But in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of the decision was made creatively based on based on how the film is shaping up, that this is more appropriate than what we were doing last week or whatever.
Yeah, that's filmmaking though. You don't know what the edit's going to be, and if in a few days, especially in that process, when the film you still had, I think that poster probably came out 3 months before the film release, so there was still wiggle room for the filmmakers to kind of edit and shave it down some more. So who knows what her prominence in the role would have been. So it's good to know. But
yes, and it's hard because all of these deals are made. The deals for the actors are made early in the process before photography even starts. So another really good example of this was Carl Urban on Ragnarok, which was he was contracted for a role, and he didn't have an above artwork title name, which is when your names go above at the top of the poster, because of his prominence, because we thought the role was going to be pretty minor. And then I've seen Ragnarok, Carl Urban is great, Scourge is an amazing character, and it was such a hit with every test audience and stuff. We're like, how do you not put Carl up there with the name, because he's going to be one of the people that people remember from this movie. And that's the kind of, again, the kind of thing that goes on behind the scenes all the time with credits, is a lot of conversation as the edit is refined, as things are finalized. You say, great, I know that when we first made the deals 2 years ago, this made sense, but based on where we're at now, this other situation makes way more sense. We should do this instead.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. That, like, well, not for you, but because your film's like always fluctuating in a way, because you kind of don't know what's going on with, like you said, his name kind of should be above the poster, but you don't know how the edit's going to turn out. Uh, like on posters, does it ever bother you when like if you would have three actors standing like side to side and their names above them aren't like corresponding to the right actors? Because when I see
it,
posters like that, it gives me a headache. I
it
hate when that
it
happens, but I
definitely used to,
understand.
it definitely used to drive me crazy until I understood why that was. Like, because yeah, I was, especially the two-handers was always the difficult one, where it's like Silver Linings Playbook, and it's like, Jennifer Lawrence and like Bradley Cooper, but then it says Bradley Cooper over Jennifer Lawrence, and then, like, that used to always drive me crazy. But then yeah, I finally understood in the course of doing credits that obviously people are guaranteed certain positions, so you know Robert Downey Jr. always comes first, regardless of where he is physically on the poster, which is it's not so much a problem when it's, Marvel tends to do big payoff one sheets with lots of actors, so it's not that big of an issue. But it still grates on me every time it's like two names and two actors on a poster and they're flipped, and it's like you couldn't have just twisted,
It's
like
so much more
flipped it.
noticeable. Yeah, and everyone's gonna read your name. Like it looks so much better, but yeah, some things you just can't control with just switching it on the poster. There's a lot more behind it, I guess. uh, yeah, I without looking from an outsider's perspective, your role seems very like tedious, but it it seems like it evolves over time and it changes, like you said, from the edit to everything else. So it seems more exciting now that I've talked to you in person. So uh, yeah,
It's credits are definitely a job that, like, it is a specialized skill set. Like, not a lot of people find it interesting to do, it could be because it is a very repetitive process. But and again, I think a lot of it for me personally is the fact that it gives me a chance to kind of scratch that itch of being involved in a project. Like, it's I get to talk to producers, I get to go over everything. And it's no one likes doing the credits, and I'm sure the producers hate it when I'm like, okay, time to sit down with the end crawl and go through things. But it is a small area where, again, I feel like I had a chance to contribute to the final product. And even though it is and can be a really tedious thing, it's also something that is really important. And I keep that in mind a lot, is when I kind of reach those points where I inevitably, like, I'm human like anyone else. When I'm reading through 3,000 names, some days I just get tired of reading through the names and spell checking and stuff. But it helps to remind myself how important that credit is to people. Marvel Studios in particular is so generous with their credit, and they try to credit everyone they can. And seeing firsthand how that affects people, that may have never gotten a credit before, or who work really hard for not a lot of money in some cases, get that recognition, is something that I really enjoy about my job, and does help get through the days when I'm literally staring at a screen for 10 hours spell checking names.
does it frustrate you at all when you see people walking out of the theaters before like the credits are over? Because like even if it's not a Marvel film, you know how much work goes into those black scroll down credits. So does that frustrate you?
Only, not personally. I do generally find that frustrating, only in the sense that, like, I am one of those people that thinks it's appropriate to pay respects to all the people that made the movie by sitting credits, which is one of the reasons I love the fact that Marvel does tag sequences and makes it through all
Yeah.
of them for something. But other than a general, like, I wish people would spend more time paying attention to the artists that made the movie, I don't get too bent out of shape about it. I mean, I get it. Like, you've just sat in a movie theater for 2 hours, you may not want to sit through another 6 minutes of names scrolling, but and it's tough because it is definitely a more meaningful process for me to sit through now. But I also recognize not a lot of people in the audience have that. Like I'll sit in a movie with my wife, and now instead of sitting through the credits and saying, oh yeah, it's really interesting. Let's see who worked on this movie. Now I'm like looking at things from a technical eye. I'm like, oh, interesting. They did a 4-column format centered, with centered attributes. And my wife's just like, can we please go now? I don't care. But I understand that for your average viewer, that may not be like who the scenic person was may not be something that the average person cares about, because again, most audience members are watching the content. But I do think it's important to pay respects to the people that work hard on a movie, which is why I think my usual line of delineation is, if you're a professional in this industry or if you work on films, you should sit through other people's credits to appreciate them. But if you're an average viewer out there who isn't particularly keen on the process or the behind the scenes of it all, then I don't begrudge you leaving the theater 5 minutes early.
Do you have a name for before the black credits, and then you have before that you have the artistic kind of animated credits? Do you have a name for those credits that are kind of animated in a way?
Ultimately, credits are broken into 2 pieces: main credits and end credits. The main credits, whether they are before a film or after a film, are called the main titles. If it's at the end of a film, they're called main on end titles, or MOEs. But those are the main titles are the ones that usually have some sort of graphic or some sort of display. They're the ones where everyone has usually a single card or a shared card that calls out their specific role. And then the end credits, whether they are in card formats like they are in TV, or a rolling crawl, which is called an end crawl in a feature where it scrolls up the screen, are the end credits of the film. So that's an important distinction for a lot of people, actors in particular, because your credit will either be end credits only, which is when you're in that cast run at the top of the crawl, or you're in the main titles on your own card, or a main titles with a shared card, or main titles in first position. And that's the important element where main titles versus end titles is a big differentiation line for a lot of people.
Do you have a favorite main titles that you've worked on? 'Cause I remember, I think Homecoming was really cool. It was like pop art in a way. That's one that I remember. Is there one Marvel one that really, I think, Doctor Strange looks really cool too, the main titles of that.
Yeah, I know I'm a little partial because all of the stuff we work on, I see the iterations now, which is always things. But I remember being really wowed by the Black Panther credits were really something. I remember thinking it was really cool. I remember, I'm trying to think. I think Thor Ragnarok credits were a lot of fun. I remember the Infinity War credits, I think, were maybe some of the most impactful. They were really simple, white text on black, but it was such an impactful moment that those really stood out. But yeah, it's kind of funny. I always enjoy that part of the process, is because much of what I work with is just text, Word documents where I send it to vendors and say, here's what the credit should be. I always really enjoy getting the first look of them sending product back and saying, here's what we're thinking of doing. Here's an idea we have. That's always one of my favorite parts of the job, is just seeing how other artists have conceptualized this kind of stuff.
Definitely. Working with those artists is awesome, and seeing that product to me is really great to see in that format in the main titles. So after working in entertainment for so long, this is one of my last questions, Mr. Willis. Thank you for spending your time with us today. What makes you get up in the morning after being in the entertainment for so long? Is it that creative aspect or is there something specific that makes you get up and be excited for this job that you keep doing? You've been at this role at Marvel for almost 6 years now. So what makes you excited to go back to it all the time?
I think the thing that excites me and really gets me up every day is just the opportunity to work on these, these pieces of content, this entertainment that so many people enjoy. I am, first and foremost a cinephile, film fan, whatever you want to call it. I love movies myself. I love television. I love watching stories. I love telling stories. So I think the thing that really excites me every day is, is knowing that the work I'm doing is contributing to, making this content that I'm proud of, that I'm proud to put my name on. And like I mentioned earlier in the interview, that came as a really stark contrast because for a long time I was okay just kind of working a back office job. And I've really realized that isn't satisfying to me anymore. Like the idea that I could work anywhere, and that really was the differentiation is, I can't do, credits is such a unique thing to film and television. It's not like I can be a credits person for, Johnson and Johnson, consumer products, or, the Ford Motor Company, because it's integral to film and television, to motion pictures. And before, when I was kind of working in general business administration, it was that feeling of kind of interchangeability where it's like, I'm tracking payments and fulfilling contract obligations. Like, I don't necessarily have to be in entertainment doing this. I could do this for a law firm or a products firm or a car company or a marketing firm. Like that skill set was maybe a little more marketable because I could take it anywhere. But I think that's also what led to me feeling like I wasn't as excited about my job because it just felt like I could be doing anything. Like, it was one of those things. I've had jobs where I walked into offices and saying, if there weren't movie posters on the wall, this could be a manufacturing floor in a warehouse. And like my job wouldn't make a difference, And I like the fact that I'm more like I'm up to my elbows in production now, like I make content and there's really nothing else I can do with this specific skill set. And that's what excites me every day, is knowing that I get to come in, that I get to wake up and I get to, again, no matter how tedious or detail oriented the specific task might be, it is all aimed at getting a better quality product onto the screen so that audiences can enjoy it, because one of those audience members is me.
Yeah, you want it to live up to your own expectations because you're also a storyteller and, like you said, a cinephile. So, and thank you for having high expectations for me as an audience member. So, but one of my last questions is, what are you working on now, and what are we going to see next from you, like that your hands have touched in a way?
I mean, obviously, anything Marvel, you'll see my my credits on. We are ramping up to do, like I said, a lot of content. So, next year, obviously, our next projects are, Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals this year for features. We still have, Miss Marvel and Hawkeye coming out on streaming. What If, the animated show, is coming out. So it's an exciting time to kind of see all of the content that Marvel's generating. For me personally, I'm just kind of getting back into writing after a long hiatus of just kind of not, between family and a really demanding job. I haven't had a lot of time to write, so I'm kind of getting back into that and looking forward to seeing kind of where the creative muse takes me and what I get a chance to work on. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Are you a Final Draft, or I'm a fade-in guy? Like, what's screenwriting service do you use?
I don't. I kind of actually go back and forth.
Okay.
I do not find Final Draft to be nearly as problematic as some of my colleagues who just absolutely hate it. Like, I've never had the catastrophic problems that other people do. Final Draft has always been just fine to me. But Fade In, Kent, the designer, is a friend of mine, and I really want to support him, and I really like his product. So what I tend to find myself doing is I write in Fade In when it's my own work, like specs and things like that, and then I'll migrate back to Final Draft when it's production work or something, just so I don't have to constantly be exporting and changing file types.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because a lot of people use Final Draft, but Fade In, I just love the simplicity of it. It's very straightforward.
He spent a lot of time working on developing a UI that really works well and only has what you need, and not a lot of the legacy issues that Final Draft sometimes seems to have.
I want to thank him someday, but because he made screenwriting very easy for me as a newcomer who's been doing it for years now. So thank you, Mr. Kent.
Yeah, he's great. And yeah, I am so glad to be able to recommend that software too, because that's a hard thing. Is I talk to new writers a lot, people who, and it's really hard to say, look, if you're just trying screenwriting out, spend $250 on a screenwriting program. Like that's a really high bar, especially when you're talking to students or younger writers. So I really love the fact that, and I don't know what Fade-In is now, $80 or whatever.
$50 for students.
50 for students. I really like the fact that I can be like, look, here is a fully functional piece of screenwriting software. It'll do everything Final Draft does, but it is cheaper. You get free updates. You only have to buy it once. And I've really enjoyed having the opportunity to recommend that to people who, again, like, look, if you really want to buy Final Draft because you're starting a screenwriting career, like, knock yourself out. But like, here is a much cheaper alternative that will, as you're learning the process, will save you a lot of money and a lot of hardship. And it's really nice to have those kinds of products and be able to support people that design them.
I agree. And for my final question for you today, Mr. Willis, is what advice would you give to anyone who is currently a filmmaker and is aspiring to work at their dream company that for you is Marvel, and you are currently there still? So what would you give to that person who would like to work at Marvel someday, who is in a small business affairs job at a smaller company?
It's cliched, but it's, keep at it. It took me 10 years to get a job at Marvel. I started applying for jobs in 2005. The very moment they announced that Marvel was going to start its own company and make films, I'm like, I want to work for Marvel. I love Marvel. I love comics. I want in, so from phase 1, Iron Man 1, all the way through, every time I saw a job pop up at Marvel, I was like, I got to apply, and it took exactly 10 years. It wasn't until 2016 that I finally landed the job that kind of got my foot in the door. And that has been my experience with the industry in general, which is like, there are no quick paths, and there are no, and I mean, really, there's no even kind of predicting where your career is going to take you. So I think that, anyone who's starting out or at any point in their career, really, like, I always tell people to keep their goals in mind, like figure out where you want to go and what you really want. And that can certainly change over time, but like, have an idea of what you want to accomplish or achieve, and then just be willing to be patient enough and work hard enough that because it could take you 10 years. It could take you 20. It could take you, you might be one of the lucky ones and have it happen right away. But like, if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a director, if you want to work at Marvel Studios or any studio really, that's probably going to be a long haul process where it's not going to be a direct path. You may have to bounce around a while. You may have to pay your dues somewhere else, or, kind of like, you never know when the opportunities are going to come along. So the advice I always give people is like, just keep in mind what your goals are so that you can constantly be, angling towards achieving what you want. But then also be open to, a circuitous route, because, it's not always a direct path. And, it's, some of the best times in my career have been, things I didn't expect where I was going to end up, and it became a really beneficial experience, or it really laid the groundwork for the next thing. And that's part of the fun, is the journey. So.
Yeah. And for anyone out there who would like to work at Marvel, it sounds like Jeff may be getting like an assistant credits person soon to help him out. So watch out for that.
Well, it is a manager level role that does require some experience. So, if you've done credits before or have worked for a company before, that's one thing. But it is definitely not an entry level job. There's a lot to it.
Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully, you'll fill that spot though to help you out, because it seems like you're going to be a very busy person in the incoming future, Jeff. So
I mean,
fingers crossed.
Marvel seems to have no signs of slowing down, which I think is a good thing for all of us, because I really enjoy the content. So it's exciting to see where phase 4, phase 5, and beyond are going to take us.
Thank you so much for talking to me, Jeff. It was awesome talking to you and learning more about your job. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, and hope to